warning before you listen. This epic is not for children, nor for the faint of heart. We retell the ancient Greek myths as they were born, unfiltered, unsoftened. Scenes of violence, curses, betrayals, and a hunger for power that shows no mercy. Given the many conflicting versions of the Titan War, the events have been rebuilt to complete the missing pieces. Here, we tell the myth as it was meant to be told. Sources and references are listed in the episode description. Chapter 72. From the Titan War, Clash of Weapons and the Fall of Time. The Year of Iron, when the weapon trained its wielder. A weapon is not forged in the hand. It is forged in the chest. This was not a time for battle, but a time for isolation. Not the kind where gods flee, but where they confront the truth of their own names. Zeus stood. The lightning wasn't in his hand. It was in his eyes. And he said in a voice that felt like a scream yet to be born, "Now, I know who I am, but the weapon that will defeat Cronus cannot be wielded with a sword. It must be understood with a clarity deeper than time itself." He turned to his brothers and added, "We do not need to train ourselves to kill, but to survive ourselves when we carry this rage." Poseidon struck his trident into the ground and said, "The sea knows me, but my trident is still waiting to know me." And Hades, shadows trembling behind him, whispered, "The dead follow me, but I have yet to meet the one I become when I wear this fire." Demeter shook her head slowly and said, "The earth does not plant swords. It plants what deserves to bloom in blood." Hestia followed. "If we are to enter the fire, let us first understand for whom we are lighting it." Then Metis nodded, and her face said everything. "Yes, it is time to know ourselves, not as gods, but as the sparks of a coming resurrection." They parted. No one said goodbye, but the silence they left behind was a promise. The three Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, Arges, stood still. They didn't speak. They just smiled, as if they had already seen what was coming and had no need to say it. Zeus, the thunderbolt of recognition. He climbed to a peak so high even air feared to linger there. He sat among the clouds, the thunderbolt in his hand trembling, not from weakness, but from the question of whether his hand deserved to hold it. Each time he tried to release it, he burned. Each time he tried to scare the skies with it, the wind laughed in his face. Until he stopped and looked at it the way a stranger might look into their own eyes, and he said, "I do not want you to rule. I want you to help me forgive myself." And in that moment, the thunderbolt glowed, not like lightning, but like a confession. Since that day, the bolt no longer came from his hand. It came from his eyes, his voice, even from the silence of his rage. Poseidon, the trident of silent depths. He vanished into a cave beneath the ocean. No light, no waves, no whispers. He bound his body with coral chains and placed his trident far from reach, as if to say, "If you are truly mine, return on your own." The trident did not return. Days passed in boiling silence. Then the sea cracked. The trident rose, floating toward him, not as a tool, but as a brother coming home. From that day on, every wave bowed when he passed. Every depth held its breath when he raged. The trident was no longer a flood. It became law, unspoken, undebatable. Hades, the helmet that cannot be removed. He didn't wear the helmet. He slept beside it. For 30 nights, not to dream, but to burn in a silence no one could see. On the 31st morning he woke, and it was already on his head. Not as if he had worn it, but as if it had swallowed him. Since that moment, he no longer saw the shadows saw him. Fire didn't burn him, it followed him, as if hell itself had risen to fight in his name. Every step he took echoed with unborn souls. Every breath he drew reawakened the cry of a soldier made from flame, born of curses that had never been forgiven. Once, he said, and the air melted around his voice, "I do not hide death. I remind life that there is a hell yet to be seen." And since that day, whoever stood in his shadow never returned the same. Not because they died, but because they were marked by a fire that cannot be extinguished. The weapon of the Titans, the flame that cannot be carried. It wasn't a weapon, it was a scream planted in the heart. The Hecaton carers gathered in a valley of fire, and every morning that fire pulsed through their chests like rage pulsing through veins. They had nothing left to sharpen, only a fire that lived inside them. It would not be quenched, until the name of Cronus fell into the dust. Cottus struck the ground and declared, "We are not soldiers holding weapons. We are the ones who became the weapon." Chapter 40. Days passed. Not like days of men, but like wounds nursing an idea of explosion. Time was not measured by hours, but by strikes withheld, and flames not yet unleashed. Each of them was becoming something else, not returning to who they were, but collapsing to be reforged. Zeus? He sat above the storm, not to hurl the bolt, but to ask it, "Do you know who I am?" Poseidon? He dove into his own depths to teach his rage, not to kill the one who carried it. Hades? He extinguished all light around him, just to see himself without reflection. And the Titans? Their hearts no longer beat with blood, but with fire, and with every sunrise, that fire grew clearer. They had not returned. They had not raised their weapons, but the sky had started to hear something in their silence, something that felt like approaching. They were still there, not waiting for war, but becoming it. This chapter of the epic has come to an end, but remember, what you've just heard is not a record of facts, but the echo of a myth. A story born from the imagination of the ancients, etched into the long memory of humankind. If this tale stirred something in you, if it opened a door to reflection or wonder, don't forget to support the channel and share the journey with those you love. And in the comments, tell us, which moment in this chapter struck you the most and why? We'll meet again in the next chapter of this audio odyssey through time. Until then, farewell.